Hello and welcome to the Latin department. So why should you choose Latin? Well as acquiring an understanding of some of the ancient influences which Rome has had on our modern society today, it challenges and trains the mind. Did you know that Latin was actually the core subject in all private schools up until the Second World War? And this was because it was believed that if you could get your mind to twist and bend about the around the many grammatical rules, that it would somehow make you better, it would make your mind more agile, able to grasp the tenets of other subjects. School is, after all, a place where we learn how to learn. And Latin is really good for that. It's also really good for the learning of languages. If you're a keen linguist, the Romance languages, which include Italian, French, Spanish, etc., they have their roots in Latin. We also get to read some real Roman writers in the original, which is kind of the equivalent of reading Shakespeare if you've been learning English as a foreign language for 3 years. It's pretty hard. And you get to practice your literary criticism. So if you like that kind of thing in English, then you'll manage pretty well in Latin, actually. I think it's probably easier in the Latin paper, the kind of questions they give you for your lit crit. Equally, if you don't love lit crit in English, learning how to do it in Latin will help your English. It's also a really, really good GCSE subject to have on your university application. Not many people have Latin. It just looks good. It looks intellectual. And finally, we have lovely small classes, which are really friendly and are hopefully not too boring. And I say not too boring. I mean, I hope they're jolly enough. And most importantly, you know, if you struggle, I hope you get lots and lots of personal attention from me, of a good sort. Okay, so course content. In year 10, we focus purely on completing the linguistic part of the course. Most of you will be, 3/4 of the way there, but there's nothing like practice, and it does get quite difficult. It's a real achievement to achieve, to succeed at GCSE Latin language. There are all kinds of difficult constructions that you are going to be required to understand the mechanics of. And that's what we focus on. And hopefully along the way, we get to translate some interesting pieces that refer to some interesting times in Roman history. In year 11, having completed the linguistic side of the course, we really focus on components 2 and 3, which the literature and classical civilization. Now, probably the hardest paper is the literature paper. So we'll spend the whole of the autumn term and possibly half of the spring term on that. There are 9 passages, a mixture of poetry and prose. Now, you don't actually have to translate any lines word for word in the EduCAS exam board that we use at Seaford. You do, however, need to be incredibly familiar with each piece. You need to be able to comment on the context, the style of the author. There are some fairly straightforward comprehension questions which you should be able to answer without too much trouble, because you will be familiar with these poems. There's even a vocab list at the back of, which is a special, resource that you're allowed in the exam, so that if you have a complete mind blank and you just need to be sort of jogged back into the meaning of a certain line, you can look up a word. You won't have time to look up all the words, but the odd one, certainly. There's an essay which is reasonably important because it holds a lot of marks. It's in English and you're not expected to quote from the Latin. So this is, it's a literature paper, and you will know the pieces really well. Now, magic and superstition is a great theme. It includes, there's a passage by Virgil which is about Queen Dido cursing Aeneas and building his funeral pyre and putting an image of him and various relics he's left behind, and engaging the efforts of a witch who's going to help her say the curse. There's another piece which is by Suetonius, who's a prose writer who wrote about all the portents which Julius Caesar should have taken notice of, all which pointed to the fact that he was going to be murdered. But he didn't. He didn't take any notice of them and consequently was murdered, according to Suetonius. There's a ghost story which involves a werewolf. And there are some pieces involving superstitions and things. Actually, what's really interesting is that the Roman attitude to kind of magic and superstition isn't that far from our own. There are so many connections, actually. Nothing much has changed with regard to the magic and superstition. Classical civilization. The theme is Roman towns. Now, a lot of the kids who have learnt Latin at prep school will have picked up bits and pieces about Roman towns. We learn about how they were constructed, also the daily routines of the Roman men and women. It's a fairly straightforward component, number 3, and we won't spend that many weeks on it, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. The trick is to make sure you've read all the material. But it's all done in English. Right, assessment. Now, the language part of the paper is the most important part, mark-wise, yielding 50% of the total marks. I think they will do well at the language, all the kids, because of their experience at the literature paper, actually, because the Latin they have to sort of get their head around. The literature paper is quite difficult, and if they can do that, the standard they're being asked to translate unseen is so much easier. And normally by now they will have had plenty of practice and had tons of vocab tests and gone back over all the grammar. So I would envisage that they would do exceedingly well at that, actually. Then there's the literature paper, which is a slightly shorter paper, which can be a little bit time heavy. I mean, not quite enough time. You have to kind of keep your eye on the clock, particularly when it comes to writing that essay at the end. But again, normally the standard of student we get in Latin is such that they will generally do very well at this as well. And then classical civilization, which is just 20% of the paper. So what do we expect from students? We expect them to come with some experience of Latin. It is a challenging GCSE, there's no doubt about it. And without 2 years of previous study, they will find it very hard. That said, it is fantastically rewarding for the same reason. For enthusiastic beginners and improvers, a level 1 certificate, which is only a foundation level GCSE, is available. Even so, I would not expect someone to start from scratch in year 10. It would be too difficult. Ideally, they will either have started Latin at the beginning of year 9, that's you, Tom, or they will have had some experience at prep school, perhaps dropped it for a bit, or maybe like at Seaford, it's on a carousel. But they will have some experience and they will know that it's for them. But I think it's too difficult to start from scratch. Too much material. Future pathways. As I mentioned earlier, it's a very well-respected qualification which enhances university applications. The kind of skills that Latin requires are pretty wide-ranging, from problem solving and lateral thinking, maths, to appreciation of literature, to knowledge of history, to being naturally quite linguistic. It's a good, at A level, it's a good cross-curricular subject. It sits well besides a number of different subjects. And as for careers, there are a number of careers that look favourably on a Latin qualification. Medic, lawyer, and obviously the linguistic type careers. So, any questions, please contact me. I would be delighted to hear from you. I'm sincerely hoping that all my lovely year nines stick with it. I think you're all brilliantly capable. And I look forward to seeing you next year.